Alderman Connors.
Here.
Alderwoman Barbosa. Here. Alderman McNamara.
Here.
Alderman Santiago. Alderman Simpson.
Here.
Alderman Gibson. Alderman Pabon. Alderman Smedley. Alderwoman Boulain Saavedra. Alderwoman McAdam.
Here.
5 present, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We are going to open the floor to public participation. Please state your name and address and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Are there any members here to make public comment? I do not have any signed up. Going twice, are there any members here to make public comments? The chair recognizes Alderman Pabon joining us. Comment?
Yes.
Thank you. Welcome. Say your name and address for the record. You got 3 minutes.
Should I fill this out first or no?
Just state
I
your
can
name
just
and address
go.
for the record.
You got it. Good evening, members of the Common Council. My name is Laura Bolke. I reside at 85 Settlers Knoll in Newington, but was born and raised in New Britain, and my brother and I are proud alumni of its schools. In addition, my mom was a career educator at Smalley Elementary School, and I have been a staff member in New Britain since 2004. I'm currently the 612 Curriculum Coordinator. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm here to express concern about the potential underfunding of our school district if the mayor's budget proposal is passed, particularly in light of the extreme and increasing costs in 2 critical areas, special education and student transportation. These are not optional line items. They are essential services mandated by law and ethics, and they are among the most expensive and rapidly growing needs our district must meet. In truth, the cost of nearly everything it takes to run a school district, utilities, staffing, supplies, maintenance, and technology are rising. These are not luxuries, they are the backbone of a functioning educational system. I understand that a tax decrease may sound like a welcome relief for many community members. We all feel the pressure of inflation. However, it is important to be candid. At the family level, a tax decrease is going to be small, not likely to have a meaningful impact on a family's day-to-day life. But even that small decrease, once multiplied by the number of tax-paying families in New Britain, will have a significant impact on the school district where the children of these same families go to school. The impact will force cuts to services and programs already stretched thin. Expecting a tax decrease at the same time that every cost, from diesel fuel to specialized instruction, continues to rise is, with all due respect, counterintuitive. It is akin to deciding to water a growing garden less as the summer gets hotter. We cannot hope to build a better, stronger community by undermining the very institutions that prepare our children for the future. If we want thriving schools, competitive graduates, highly qualified staff, and diverse programming, we need to be honest about what it takes to fund them, especially in districts like ours with high needs and limited resources. Thank you for your time and your continued commitment to all members of this community, especially our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Do I fill this out now?
Yes, if you don't mind, just so
Yes, okay.
I'm sure Ms. Clerk would appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
Welcome. State your name and address in 3 minutes. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm Heather Nickel. I'm the very proud principal of Holmes Elementary School. I live at 74 Breezy Corners Road in Portland. Next school year marks my 30 years of service with the school district and 40 years of working for the city of New Britain. It's been an incredible journey, one full of challenges, growth, and unwavering commitment to our community. Over the years, we've learned to do more with less. Again and again, we've stepped up, not because it's easy, but because our students, our schools, and our colleagues deserve nothing less. But this year feels different. As we brace for the dramatic cuts that may be coming, I find myself for the first time asking how I can continue to do this work. It's not that I've lost my passion or my sense of purpose. Those remain as strong as ever, but the weight of what's being asked of us with such few resources has become almost too much to bear. There's no new exciting initiative to rally around this time, no bold initiative program to inspire us forward. The request today is far simpler, yet far more urgent. It is for survival. I am asking that you seriously consider the budget that we're putting forth as a school district here in New Britain. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Principal Nichol. Do we have any other speakers tonight? Going twice. 3 times. Anyone online? Okey doke. Thank you again. I appreciate your comments, and thank you, Ms. Buckley, for commenting at this point. Seeing no further speakers, we will move on. The time is now 6:05 p.m. The first item on the agenda tonight is item 36785-1 to act upon a resolution regarding the general fund budget for fiscal year 25-26. May I have a motion? Alderman McNamara?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion to accept. Oh, we're moving to table already?
Removing.
Removing the table. All right. I should read what they put in front of me.
No worries. We have a motion to remove from the table from Alderman McNamara, seconded by Alderman Simpson. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Thank you. Motion carries. The current motion on the floor is item number 36785-1 to be referred with a neutral recommendation. At this time, I want to recognize members of the Board of Education that have come to present and discuss their budget. I don't know who should go first at this point. I'll leave it at discretion of Dr. Gasper to introduce yourself and please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you to members of the council for being here tonight. Thank you to members of the Board of Education. Specifically,
Sorry, Dr. Gasper, I just want to recognize Alderwoman Scott joined us, Alderwoman Sanchez has joined us, and Alderwoman Boylan Saavedra is joining us. It was a good timing to interrupt you. Won't happen again. Thank you.
no problem at all. So thank you for sharing your time with us tonight. Thank you in advance for your interest and your questions. Of course, I'm joined by members of the Board of Education. More specifically, I think the bulk of the speaking tonight will be by myself, joined by Ms. Ann Alfano to my right, who is our Chief Financial Officer, and Ms. Barbara Marino to my left, who is the Board of Education President. Again, thank you to the other members of the Board of Education who joined me, and thank you to members of the staff who sit behind us in support of our presentation tonight. So you have before you tonight 2 documents that were placed at your places, an updated budget narrative. It has been fast and furious with new and updated financial information coming from the state level during the state's budget process. We'll do our best to talk you through how this document tonight has had some changes, some updates since it was presented to the city back in February, I believe. And also a point of pride. You know, part of our presentation tonight is to talk to you and to the community members at home to prove what we believe is true, that the school district of New Britain is a worthwhile investment of taxpayer money. So with that, I'll pause for another introduction.
Thank you, Alderman Russell's joining us. I appreciate it.
So a lot of this will sound familiar to those of you who were serving on this council last year. I encourage you to ask questions along the way. The first part of my talk tonight is about where we stand, how we got here, how this budget has arrived, and where we stand as a school district. I was offered some technology and I refused, so I'm going to go old school and just tell you which page I'm looking at. Okay? I think it's quicker that way anyway. So if you take a look at page 2, you'll see an outline of how we got here, meaning how was this budget document developed. So what's critically important that I want you to know is this is what I would call a level services budget, or in a conversation with Alderwoman Boylan Saavedra, a status quo budget. So what we're presenting tonight that Ms. Nichol alluded to is a continuation of current services with an addition of special education, which is very strongly needed, and there is one additional assistant principal, but that is also a position that is currently filled. For the non-personnel side of the budget, we take a flat budget approach, and there's a procedure that I've used for many years as a Connecticut superintendent, both in my previous district and here, and that's we nominate budget owners. Quite simply, a budget owner is a school principal or a district-wide department leader of some kind. And those people construct the non-personnel side of the budget for their school or department, and that's held flat. and I expect them to prioritize that. Priority 1 is 85% of what that department or school received last year. Priority 1 plus priority 2 is 92% of last year's allocation, and 1 plus 2 plus 3 is 100% of what you received last year. We trust and we know that our principals know their schools best, so they're allowed to move funds inside of that amount as they see fit, more for parent events and less for copy paper or things like that. But we trust them and we trust our department leaders to plan a budget. I do want to say we took an especially strong look at staffing this year. I want to say thank you to Deputy Superintendent Evie Velasquez and Dr. Sanders from the Talent Department. We constructed a staffing formula. We looked at class size across the district. I want to be blunt with you. The results were surprising for me. I thought we would find more available FTE, more available personnel, but we didn't. Class size is at a reasonable level within the contractual limits. And also, as a reminder, if you don't happen to watch the Board of Education meetings, enrollment is growing. Despite some rumors in the community for some reason to the opposite of that, our enrollment does continue to grow at a slow but steady pace. So page 2 just outlines that process of how we got here, how we develop. So where we stand, how are we doing, how are we looking as a school district? I'm not going to talk you through each and every one of these charts, just to let you know what they represent. You'll see often, I think context is always important. So I use a group of school districts in Connecticut called District Reference Group I. We say DIRG-I for short. It's basically Connecticut cities. There are 7 of us. You'll see them listed at the bottom of the charts. Bridgeport through Wyndham, and also where available, I'll include statewide numbers. I'll also say whenever you see comparative charts like this, I'm using whatever the most recent publicly available data happens to be. Almost always from the State Department of Education's website, sometimes from the State Department website, or State of Connecticut website, excuse me. So first on the left, daily attendance. I've chosen to represent this actually differently. We used to talk to you about absenteeism. I think it's a little bit nicer to take the optimistic approach, and you'll see this is average daily attendance. And you'll see New Britain is the stronger kind of burgundy line. We're in the middle of our reference group. For your graduation rate, you can see it is down here. And again, we don't just show you the good data, we show you all the data, but you can also see that this is quite old. This is from 2022-23. That's the most recently available public data. What we know from our own data is here in New Britain, that will show a rebound in the coming year, up to just above 70%, we believe. But again, the public data is not yet available for other districts. SBAC, Smarter Balanced Assessment, is the state test for grades 3 through 8 in English Language Arts and Math. And I'm proud to say that we are showing growth. So you'll remember, and I've said this a number of times, since 2015, New Britain has ranked last in the state in reading. This sounds funny, it's a funny thing to celebrate, but we celebrate even the small gains. We are now last by the least amount that we have been last. We are growing. Lots and lots and lots of hard work by the people behind me and everybody across the district. I'm especially proud to tell you that just to the right of that in math, for the first time since 2017, we are no longer last. So we're not satisfied not being last. We have a lot of work to do, and I'm going to show you some more growth data in a little bit. Turning now to page 5, you'll see the high school test, how we compare to other similar districts. And you'll see on the left is English Language Arts and on the right is math. There's a downward trend across the whole state. If you look at the statewide data, it trends down in math as well. You'll see here we rank in the middle for SAT for districts like us. Enrollment and enrollment by race you will find in the bottom left hand on page 6. And then the first one I'm going to pause on really is multilingual learners. Multilingual learners, in a way, is somewhat similar to special education. Every single student who is identified as a multilingual learner, and that's via a proficiency test in language, by law and by morals and ethics, needs more service. So in some way, every single English language learner, or multilingual learner as we call it now, is a student who's receiving some form of additional service. just like a student who might be special needs. So as you see, we have two parallel lines. Ours is 19.1%. So just pause and think about that. So there are 2, 4, 6, 8, 7. Imagine if 2 or 3 of you at this table were multilingual learners, where English was not your first language and you were learning English. That's what our district looks like. So about 1 in 5 kids is a multilingual learner in the New Britain school system. Just under 20%. And then moving on, magnet school enrollment. This also will take a little bit of explanation. And magnet school enrollment is up over time. You see from 568 to 778. On the right, this actually has some critical implication on the state budget. You'll see this is the enrollment that we pay to mostly CREC, but other magnet schools as well. You see that strong dip in the current year. This is because a law passed that says what districts pay is capped at 58% of the 2023-24 rate. That law remains in effect, but it was in doubt whether or not it would be funded. Thankfully, it is showing up as funded in both the governor's budget and the appropriations committee budget. But that's why the strong downward turn in what we pay for magnet school tuition. We're going to talk a lot tonight, I would suspect, about students with disabilities, special education programming. If you look on the left, I'd just like to show you the growth in both the number and need, and we've tried to do this visually this year for you to show you that it's not just the quantity of kids who require special education programming. You can see that has ranged from 2,200 students to about 2,400 students. So even more than the multilingual learners number. We're at somewhere around 23% of our student population are identified as needing special education programming. So a quarter, 1 in 4 students require special education programming. And just like I mentioned with multilingual learners, there's a broad spectrum. The need might be slight or it might be great, but every single child out of that quarter of all children in New Britain needs something in addition, some type of additional programming and services, and of course, with programming and services and staff, come cost. What I do want to point out to you, and I apologize, I'm going to have to speak with our friend Powell Figot, who makes these beautiful charts and graphs for me about the font size. So I don't think I was wearing cheaters last year when I presented to you, but I have my cheaters this year. I just want to bring your attention, if I could please, to, first of all, the purple bars as you look across this bar chart. Those are students in our KEY program, and KEY predominantly serves students on the autism spectrum. So these are students whose needs are great. KEY, if you're in the KEY program, you don't have mild autism. You have a level of autism that requires specialized programming and a very high staff to student ratio. You can see over time that's gone from 181 students to 268. A little less than doubling, adding, I don't know, maybe adding 60 or 70% on top of the original. I'd also bring your attention to outplacements. Outplacements are students where we have tried to program for them in district, but we cannot. We just simply don't have the services or the facilities. And you can see the growth there from 68 students in the far left to 130. So in that case, literally doubling the number of students who receive outplacements. And I'll tell you that Mr. Spalding and his staff do everything possible to try to serve students in district. In fact, we currently serve around 500 students through these various in-district programs. All of those 500 students would be an outplacement in a smaller district like the one where I used to work that simply doesn't have the capacity to do in-district programming. But nonetheless, despite our efforts, special ed outplacements have increased by very nearly double. And this is when I talk to my friends who are outside of the profession, just to bring that home, and I'm sure members of this council remember this. Each outplaced student, it is not uncommon that that student is a cost per year of $100,000 to $250,000 a year or more. We'll talk later, there's this big thing called excess cost, which is money that's supposed to come back to us from the state. And right now, the predictions for that in next year's budget are all over the place. So really important context there, because special education is, at this point, probably next to, as was mentioned earlier, after salaries and transportation, it's the biggest budget driver apart from that. And again, we have a moral and a legal obligation to serve these kids well. On the right, you'll see what students with disabilities cost overall. This is not a metric that we create. This is, I'm sorry, was there a question? I apologize. This is not a metric we create. Ms. Alfano submits this as part of our annual, what's called our EFS report, which goes to the state, where we have to show how much money we're spending per special education student. You can see it went from 45 million to a total of 57 million, and these are just the local dollars. So just in round numbers, if you think our current budget is somewhere around 130 million, 57 million of the 130 million is going to special education students. Obviously a very substantial portion, and the trend line obviously goes up. I'm gonna brag now, can I? This is the part where really, again, part of this presentation is for you and for the people at home watching to say that the investment is worthwhile and we take the money seriously and we do important and good things with the money. So I want to thank Deputy Superintendent Ms. Velasquez, who made this presentation to the board on Monday night, together with Dr. Shamel Lewis, the principal of Jefferson School. I'm not going to talk you through every single chart and graph here, but I'll say I'm finishing my third year as your proud superintendent, and it's starting to work. The changes we've put in place, the big moves that have been supported and endorsed by the Board of Education, the daily grind by our teachers and paraprofessionals and custodians, the numbers are starting to bend towards the positive. So I emphasize start because that's why we call it green shoots. It's kind of like daffodil season for the school district, right? We're just starting to see the positive change. I'll take you through the charts here in this second packet, and I'll just tell you what they're all about. I apologize, there are not page numbers here, but I'll just tell you what's at the top. Percent at grade level on SBA, ELA, and math. I showed you overall for the whole district was in my narrative, but this is broken out by grade. And if you could look at ELA 3, that's English Language Arts for grade 3, trends up over time. Math grade 3 trends up over time. This is 3 years of results. It's important to know that these are different kids taking the test each year. But if you look, and as Ms. Velasquez noted, the green checks underneath some of these bars shows really in 9 of the 12 measures, we're seeing really nice substantial increases. And again, this doesn't happen by chance. This doesn't happen as a fluke. It's lots of hard work, really tough decisions, sometimes really lots of arguments too, to get this kind of change, but the numbers are starting to move in the positive direction. The next chart, it says IRLA, A-R-C-I-R-L-A. ARC, American Reading Company, is our new reading program that we initiated last year in response to the state law that required us to do so. And IRLA is the test that teachers give on a regular basis. You'll see proficient compared to last year is up 10%. And then on the far right, emergency are the kids who were really far behind is down by 11%. So kids who are really far behind, down. Kids who are reading on grade level, up. The next chart is another reading assessment. That's DIBELS, comparing the blue to the green for kindergarten. This is just a kindergarten through grade 3 test. You'll see, compared to last year, kinder, first, second, third, all up a substantial number of percentage points over last year. Lectura is kind of like DIBELS, but it's for our Spanish speakers, most notably in the De Loreto dual language program is where this assessment is administered. A little bit more up and down, but in general, more ups than downs on the Lectura. Also for our multilingual learners, Las Links, a student has to pass the Las Links in order to be exited out of our multilingual program, which is a good thing, which means they've attained proficiency in English. And if you compare the exits, you'll see lots more exits this year compared to last year. So we're serving our multilingual learners better and better. SAT is a little bit more of a mixed story, but still some positives here. You'll see ELA, the preliminary, is up, most notably over 2 years ago. 2 years ago, ELA at the high school SAT was 22%. Preliminary, it's not public data yet. We're just looking at preliminary results, 31. Math, well, that's going to be a focus area for us for sure. It's flat. Next is depth of knowledge, and this is data about our adults. We actually do something that I call quantify adult action. Every time a principal looks at a lesson plan, or visits a class, or looks at student work produced in the class, they have an opportunity to record that. Depth of knowledge is a measure of how hard the thinking is in the classroom. And we want the hard thinking to happen, levels 3 and 4. This is how our adults have gotten better at planning rigorous instruction over time. So if you look at, for example, the center chunk discourse, that's what they're observing in the classroom. At the start of last year, they saw rigorous thinking 19% of the time. So far now at the end of this school year, they're seeing it 46% of the time. So our adults are getting better at their practice too. So when we tell you that we need instructional coaches and we need to spend money on professional development, that's what shows up here. A particular focus of mine as superintendent has been trying to get more and more kids college credit while they're still at high school. 2 years ago, we had 447 students attain college credit in some way. Last year, 543. And the data from semester 1 of this year is 536. So we're expecting that to tick up just a little bit more. Teachers are coming to work on the next chart. Despite what the rumors are or the complaints on social media and lots of talk about people being burnt out, we're all burnt out. But teachers are coming to work more and more. The average daily teacher absences is down. On the next chart, as I showed you also, student attendance, or in this case, student absences, are down across all different types of kids and grade levels. We're doing a better and better job of diversifying our workforce. This chart shows the state teachers of color versus our teachers of color. You can see that we are almost twice the state rate of diversifying our teacher force. And the final two I'm actually going to skip over, but they're there for you to see. That's Dr. Lewis presenting about Jefferson School in particular. But again, even at Jefferson, you'll see some really nice gains where the reds go down and the blues go up. Those are on reading tests. And then the final chart is Jefferson School discipline referrals are going down. So thank you for letting me brag a little bit. I'm happy to pause there and answer any questions before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty financial stuff.
Thank you, Dr. Gasper. I appreciate the bragging. I do think it's well-deserved in the realm of college credits, though. I've been bragging about those for a couple of years since I was lucky enough to become alderman. First question, hand raised, was Alderman McNamara.
Thank you, Dr. Gasper and board members, staff. The green shoots are positive outcomes in the separate new report we got. Can you assess, would you assess this as a recovery from the pandemic? We had an infusion of federal dollars, and how that may have made an impact towards the positive outcomes you're citing tonight, and have we recovered from that bad time?
Kinda is my very professional answer. The federal dollars certainly helped, and they were certainly put to use in a lot of positive ways here in New Britain. I wouldn't say that the federal dollars were the recovery, because we were at this relative level of performance before the pandemic as well. As I said, starting in 2015 and 2017, we were ranked last in the state. What I attribute, I guess what I'll say, a story from 3 years ago, it's coming up on 3 years ago that I arrived here and first addressed this council. When I arrived, I found no shortage of hardworking people who had love for the children of New Britain in their heart. What I also found, though, was not a very well organized way of going about the work. So what we're engaged in is taking really good people, really dedicated people, and reorganizing the work, reorganizing the staffing in some cases, to make sure that people who need support get it, meaning the adults need support get it. They're helped to higher levels of performance. And we also hold ourselves accountable, and that includes the superintendent. We look at data a lot. As you can tell by the plethora of charts and graphs in my presentation tonight, we're always checking, not just the kids, as some of my charts did, we're checking the adults too. And that growth you saw and how hard kids are thinking in lesson plans and discourse and student work, I'm here to tell you, this is my 29th year in this profession. And that level of growth by our adults is remarkable. So what I like to say when I have a chance to speak to the staff, most especially the school leaders, is kid outcomes get better after adult practice gets better. And that's easy to say. But again, I reminded the board of this when I spoke the other night. When they interviewed me for this job, I reminded them that this would be 3 to 5 years of work. And we're coming to the end of year 3. So that's why we call it green shoots. There's a long way to go. There's a long way to go. And we're not going to be satisfied with 30% of our kids proficient in the SAT ELA. It's great that it's going up, but we want that number to be much higher. My
Thank
pleasure.
you, Alderman McNamara and Alderman Barbosa.
First, congratulations on the improvements. It is a long way. There is a long way to go. I'm a multilingual learner. I know the energy that it took back then. I'm not going to say how many moons ago. I can only imagine what it's like now with the disabilities and the distractions. My question is the 70-20-10 rule. You have 70% of the students need hard assistance, IEPs. You have 10% of the students who are ready for college the minute they enter high school. What happens to that 20% of the students that are not tested for IEPs, are not as gifted? They need a little bit of instruction. They're given instruction. Once the teacher walks away, those students are left basically to learn on their own because now they're focusing on the students who need the extra help.
Sure. So what we're developing right now, and we've just begun this, and this is going to be mentioned in an audit of special education that I commissioned about 1.5 years ago, using some of those federal dollars, is a system called MTSS, Multi-Tiered System of Supports. And you apply that to both the academic side and the behavioral side. And the idea is the multi-tiers are tier 1 is the instruction, whether that be behavioral instruction or academic instruction, that every kid receives equitably. Tier 2 are the kids who, I like to say, Ms. Velasquez could do a much better job of explaining this, but these are the kids who need extra help to stay caught up. With a little bit of extra contact time, a little bit of extra treatment, they can stay on pace. And then there's something called Tier 3, which that's for those students who are 2 to 3 to 4 years behind grade level. And those are not necessarily special education students. Some people, I think, erroneously think that Tier 3 is special ed. No, typically we would refer to special ed after a Tier 3 intervention. Extra help hasn't worked. So we've begun rolling that out over the past year, getting much more serious about it, and it's going to be part of our plan next year and the year after.
Thank you, Dr. Gasper. Thank you, Alderman Barbosa. Additional questions, Alderman McNamara?
I'll proceed with the financials if,
That's, yes.
okay. That's why we're here.
Everybody wants the dollars.
That's why we're here. So again, what we strive to, I'm sorry.
Alderwoman Scott,
Yes.
real quick.
Yeah, thank you so much for all the hard work you guys are doing and for coming out. And I love even if it's small improvements, I love them. I just want to bring up something. I did put in a petition, gosh, I can't even remember when it was, April 10th, 2024. And since you brought up the discipline, I thought I'd bring this up. I was just wondering how many children are being arrested at school and what disciplinary actions are being taken. How many minority children are being disciplined and arrested?
So I don't have that in front of me.
Some of the data on that.
Yeah, I don't have that in
since
front of me.
April.
What I can tell you is that is all public. So you can easily access that. Any member of the public can access that through the state's site called EdSite, EdSIGHT.
Do you guys look at that often?
We do. We do. Here's what I can tell you about the most serious infractions. We look at our suspension and expulsion data, and we're looking at that now. We do that at year end. And in the past 2 years, it has not been substantially out of alignment with the overall demographics of the district. So we do look at that by race, by gender. As superintendent, I only receive the most serious of disciplinary infractions, right? We have very good people who handle those at the school level. When at all possible, we implement something that we call a stipulated agreement. And what that means is it's kind of like a last chance. So if the student has done something that was not seriously disruptive to the learning environment, but is, under state law and board policy, an expellable offense, very often that child is offered a stipulated agreement, which is basically, I'm letting you go back to school, but you're on watch for the next calendar year. And those, I haven't run the numbers, but just if I had to guess, and Mr. Richardson behind me would have a better guess because he implements a lot of those agreements, those are typically, I would say, more than 85 or 90% successful. In other words, 85 or 90% of those kids do not reoffend. So we're keeping those students out of the expulsion program. I'll also say though, and this is perhaps a strange thing to say, I'm quite proud of our expulsion program. We had a good expulsion program when I arrived, but we used some of the COVID money, I believe, to make it better. So we took an unused building. People called it the Butler building. I was like, who's this guy Butler? It just turns out Butler is like the manufacturer of such buildings. I didn't know that. And that building's about to be renamed over behind Pulaski in honor of a community member. So our expulsion site functions as a small school. Students are transported, they're fed, they have certified teachers, special education teachers. Mr. Todd Verity is the principal of that program, and that's not something that you'll find in a lot of other districts where we take it that seriously. In addition, a staff member from CMHA attends every expulsion hearing to offer counseling services to the kids who may be expelled, again, not at my decision, but at the decision of an independent hearing officer. And arrests, I would suspect that they are extremely few. I don't have the exact number. If I had to guess this year, that number is less than 20. But again, that's all public data, and it can be found on EdSite.
Okay. And the expulsion center, I really appreciate the small settings for the kids, the kiddos that I work with, and I do agree with that. I wonder if there's like a different name we could call it.
It's about to be renamed in honor of a community member.
Yeah.
Yep. It's
Yeah.
about to be renamed.
Oh, that's going to be just Harry Springer's?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, like the
Yep.
program itself, so that way it's kind of like, it's not such a negative
No,
thing,
and when
'cause-
you walk into there, it feels like a school.
Yeah,
It doesn't feel like a prison sentence. It
Yeah.
feels like a school. And
Yeah.
again, Mr. Verity does an excellent job of supporting those kids and parents. And again, this sounds like a funny thing to boast about. It is not uncommon that the parents of an expelled student ask to keep their kids at that
Right.
program. Because these are kids who've struggled at the large high school for one reason or another, and they tend to flourish in the small setting.
exactly, yeah. And I wonder, like, what steps are we taking to get more of those settings?
So we have, of
I
course,
know it's gonna cost money, but,
we have Brookside and
Yeah.
Satellite. Brookside typically serves around 65 to 70 kids. Satellite typically somewhere between the 125 to 160 range. And we also find good success there. The board has begun, I hope we will take it up again soon, more of a strategic conversation about what do we see as kind of the future use of our school buildings.
thank you, I hope that we can get more of them.
Yeah, my
Because I
pleasure.
definitely see the improvement with the kids that I see, so, thanks.
Thank you, Alderman Scott. Thank you, Dr. Gasper. I believe on to finances now. Yes.
So I'm not gonna, for the sake of time, I'm not gonna belabor every number on the page. I'll just simply say what the page is showing us, and really happy to answer any questions. At this point, Ms. Alfano is going to help me answer a lot of questions, I'm sure. Again, we like to be very, very transparent with where the money comes from and where it goes. So page 10, I'm sorry, I'll go to page 9 first. That's simply just an equity of staffing look. So what is the class size across our various elementary schools? And the elementaries are the easiest ones to compare, obviously, because of the way that they are programmed. At the bottom, actually, what I should say is again, at the top, what you'll find there is no extremely small class sizes. Right? We don't have class sizes of 9 or 12 in our schools. So earlier when I said we took a really hard look at class size to see if we could spare any staff, we can't. At the bottom of that set on page 10, this is all staffing by union. So just so you know what types of people we have on staff. Independent administrators, those are people like my senior leadership team and others who are not in the union. Local 51 is the administrators union. Local 871 is the teachers union. 2407 are paraeducators. 1186 is a mix of custodians, nurses, administrative assistants. Local 818 is our smallest unit. Those are kind of coordinators and managers, and then non-union other employees. So you just can see what our current staffing is and what is proposed from left to right, and how that plays out in a pie chart, if you're a visual person. Turning the page is again staffing, but rather than by union this time, by where the money comes from. So you'll see general fund on the left to general fund, ECS set aside, Alliance title, IDEA, school readiness, and other. You'll note that we're trying to offset the impact to the local taxpayer. If you see across the top, the general fund employees actually go down. So where possible, we're moving our employees, you'll see most notably going up on the Alliance line. And we'll talk more about what we think is going to happen with the Alliance dollars in a moment. Down below, you can see how that staffing plays out over time. Have these ranks increased or have they shrunk? That's on the top of page 12. And then how that staff is distributed is at the bottom of page 12. I'll say some of those ratios, when they look really small, it's because, as Ms. Scott was just saying, a lot of our, not a lot, but some of our schools are small on purpose. So schools like Brookside and Hal's are smaller schools because of their design. My budget, as supported by the board, does request some additional staffing. I'm at on page 13 now, and I mentioned these quickly earlier. I'm sure that you've all paid attention to the news. I showed you those increasing special ed numbers earlier. We are not unique. It's hitting the cities of Connecticut and of the nation most acutely, but you can see the bulk of my requests for additional staff are exactly targeted at our students with special needs. There's one assistant principal. That's actually because it was currently an unfunded position that I requested that the board add back in the current year. That's an assistant principal at Chamberlain School. I'm requesting that that be continued. Other than that one position, board certified behavior analysts, paraeducators, school psychologists, social workers, and special education teachers are all simply to serve that increasing number and increasing severity of students with special needs. I'm gonna move on to page 14, and this is where this page is definitely different than the original narrative. I'm gonna do my best to tell you where there might have been changes. Page 14 is a change from the original narrative that you received. We are changing this based on updated information from the state on the Alliance money, or ECS. It's confusing. There's two kinds of ECS. One ECS you get, and another ECS we get. The thing that you just call ECS, the municipality receives, but a chunk of the ECS is called Alliance, and that comes straight to the district. What's important to know is the Alliance is not bonus dollars. It's not extra. It's exactly what the formula says every Alliance district should get. It's just the Alliance district monies come straight to the district, and the ECS go straight to the municipality. So this is what we are requesting and how the funding sources would look. The general fund, we are requesting $139.3 million, and you can see the rest of the funding sources there. We've done something a little bit different just for reference this year in the two shades of kind of darker and a little bit less dark blue across the top of the pie chart. So we're trying to show those two parts of the funding of the general fund. So of the 139 million that we are requesting, 52% of that comes to you, the municipality, in the form of the, quote, regular ECS. So of the 139 million, 47, call it 48% would be from local New Britain taxpayers. And the 52% is what you, the municipality, receives from the state. Just trying to be as clear as we can with a very complex funding stream. Moving on to page 15, again, this would have changed since your original narrative that you would have received with our full budget. I want to indicate to you something on the top chart of 15, about halfway down, you'll see a line that just says increase in ECS. That's actually, not to be too confusing, that's actually increase in Alliance. Sorry for the confusion between the terms. When Ms. Alfano looked up our expected amount of Alliance dollars back in October, one number was given. And then, by, when did it change? Maybe by January. In January, the state actually increased that number. So we wanted to be very transparent with you. So since the original budget was prepared, approximately an additional 1.9 million is projected to come to us in Alliance money. Rather than make guesses and change all those numbers up above, what I asked Ms. Alfano to do is just write that in as a revenue in the chart that you have here, so you can see that.
Can I stop you there for a second,
course.
Dr. Gasper, if you may, Mr. Chair? So you were originally projected to get about 8.8 million, I think, in Alliance money, is that correct?
Or is that the new number?
That's the new number, 8.8.
The 8.8 increase is the newest number.
Well, that includes the 1.9? Because originally in your budget, it already had 8 million assumed. When you presented in January to the city, we already assumed 8 million. So I want to see what the 1.9 is in addition to what we already assumed in January.
Sure.
So the number, so the number that we had in December, November, December timeframe, it was the 122 million, which is the 48 million for Alliance. Now we were given the 124 million in ECS, I'm just rounding, 124 million, which brings us to approximately 50 million, 50.3 million.
And what's the current year? If it's 50, we'll just round down to 50 million for the coming year. What is the year we're in for Alliance? 32?
I'm sorry, what is the year
No,
that we're
no,
in?
the amount of money you're getting in this current year from Alliance District funds.
Oh, the current year, sorry, we're getting 41.5 million.
41.5. Okay, thank you.
Of course. So the chart here, once I've kind of explained how we had to add in this new revenue that was unexpected at the time of presenting the original budget, what we're trying to show you here is contractual local cost changes, as the title says. So just looking at, for example, across the top, teacher salaries, fiscal year 25 amount of 44.8 million, fiscal year 26 amount of 45.0 million. The increase, the contractual increase on that line, and then the final column, which I think is new information from last year, is we're trying to show you that 0.21% is the degree to which that line impacts the overall budget. So trying to be as clear as we can, of course, for ourselves and for the Board of Education and of course for you. That's what that chart is attempting to show you, is contractual cost increases. And as was mentioned earlier by one of the speakers in public comment, we've included things like transportation and bus monitors. So I'd just like to, highlight that line, and this has been updated since the bid, correct? This line? So at the time the original budget was put together, we knew we were going out to bid for the special education transportation services. We knew through Ms. Alfano's research with her counterparts across the state that we were actually paying under market rate. We knew we were getting a good deal. We had some things to work on with quality of service too for that price. So Ms. Alfano actually added 10% to that line, that item for the previously presented budget. That bid has now come in and has been awarded, and it's at approximately 17% more. So the important thing to know about the line like transportation is that increase is for the same amount of buses. This is not for increased services. This is not for better services. This is what it costs to stay status quo. So that's what this chart is attempting to show you. The bottom part of page 15 are changes to overall, not just the contractual, but overall cost changes. And we attempt to make this as user-friendly as possible. So you can see in some spots we've grouped some lines together. So for example, 300-800, we're putting things like operating costs together. Of course, you can find the full breakout in the 200 and something page book where it shows every detail, but we're trying to make this as user-friendly as possible. Page 16, I think, is an important page as well. We're trying to give you a picture of that previous chart, but visually. This pie chart is just the increases. Just the increases. So for example, and this also has been updated with the city and board adopting a new insurance provider. We have updated this with regard to those potential savings compared to our previous estimates. So when we say 1.9 million for insurance and benefits, that's just the increase in the rate for the relatively the same number of employees, the same amount of benefits. Operating costs, things would be there like utilities, et cetera. Transportation and bus monitors. Special ed tuition, 3.5 million. So the trend line, as you saw with outplacements, I've actually done something I haven't done before. I've actually testified at the state legislature 3 times this spring, all on special ed. And what I've said a couple of times is the future is easy to predict. You can look at the state trend lines, you can look at the local trend lines. More students needing special education, more of those students, and the cost of outplacements. And that's what you see there. We are budgeting an additional $3.5 million for outplacement costs. Here's where we get into the current debates and differences at the state budget. I'm going to do my best to explain excess cost as quickly as I can. So there's a reimbursement. It's important to know that the board has to front the cost of every outplacement first. There's a reimbursement called excess cost. And the formula at the state is excess cost kicks in after the Board of Education spends 4.5 times its average pupil expenditure. So I believe for us that's about $85,000? $75,000, thank you. So for example, if a student is outplaced at a cost of, I'm going to try to make the math easy in my head. If a student is outplaced at a cost of $200,000 a year for one student, the first $75,000 are always the board's responsibility. Every cost above that, we qualify for reimbursement for something called excess cost. And in the past, this has been highly problematic for us because it has fluctuated. 2 years ago, we received 72.9%, I believe it was. And then at the start of this year, we were told to expect 64%. So what that means is we have to pay $75,000 for this outplacement. That leaves us $125,000 that qualify for reimbursement. But we never know how much, because in fact, it's a fixed pot of money at the state, and it depends on how many districts asked for how much reimbursement for how much you end up with. So it's quite impossible to budget well for excess cost. Now, this is where state level politics kick in.
Can I ask you something, Mr. Chair?
Of course.
Only because we're on excess cost. I couldn't find it in your budget. Where do you have cost in your budget? I couldn't find it.
As a revenue?
Yeah.
Sure.
And do you have it delineated what you're expending that money on?
It's all in special education tuition, and currently what it is it's netted against what our budget request is. so it's a net.
So what's your current budget request for that then?
Correct, so for the tuition line item, special education tuition line item is 10.2 million, and that's net of excess cost.
So last year, not the current year you're in, but last year you got 8.6 million from the state.
Correct.
So this year you have another payment coming. You're at 6.4, but you have another payment coming before the end of this school year. So you might actually hit 8 million with the other payment anticipated.
Correct, so originally our allocation was 8.4 million or 64%, but with the April state release of what their revenues their projected revenues, they've decreased our excess cost grant to 8.1 million.
Okay.
Okay, so yes, our first payment was that 6.4.
Okay, but you do anticipate another payment?
Correct.
Okay, and then just for the record, although you don't know what you're gonna get, because I understand the state formula is not perfect, none of their formulas are, because they don't fully fund them. But if the appropriations budget passes, that's another $124 million added to the excess cost.
We were just going to get to that.
So I'm going to assume that you will at least be held harmless in terms of what you got last year, but anticipate maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, so that's, thank you for the introduction, Alderwoman Boland Cervejo. So,
Keeping us
yes.
all on the same page.
So, yes, so the current politics of excess cost at the state is the governor's proposed budget for next year is $0 additional dollars. And then there was discussion of 40 million additional dollars, and then there was discussion of 81 million, and then there was discussion of, where are we at now, 120? 124. The trouble is, I understand, all of those would break the fiscal guardrails, so they would take some type of decision-making at the state level. If that were fully funded, we would, if it were fully funded at the 124 million level, we would be able to expect what is our, quote, full reimbursement rate, which is 91%. They don't reimburse at 100%, they will reimburse us at 91% of that, in my example, 125,000. And for us, this is a big unknown in this budget. For us, that's a swing between $0 additional dollars and 3.8 million additional dollars. And it's just a terrible position for you and for us to be in, to try to design a budget that might swing by $3.8 million.
If I may, Mr. Chair, two things to that. One, I certainly hope that the 124 additional money holds on top of the 40, because it's not 124 is the end all, it's on top of the 40. So that certainly would anticipate additional funds for New Britain. What those additional funds are, we don't know, but it absolutely would mean additional funds for New Britain. And it would be interesting for me to see how you utilize those funds, since you're saying that special ed is about 6 million increased in your budget?
Yeah, so the answer is simple, is we would just offset, they would go directly to offsetting the special education outplacement cost.
Yeah, no, absolutely, but you could see how that would impact then the city side of the budget in terms of what you're asking for and what
Absolutely.
your critical needs are.
Absolutely. All of us would greatly prefer to know this by the time we sit
Yeah,
before you
absolutely.
on the 8th. It's just-
Absolutely. I just want to make sure my fellow council members know that this
Absolutely.
money is on the table and being discussed. Although it's not carried in your budget, it is still a viable source of revenue depending on how things end up in early June.
I would
And then
offer one small correction, Alderwoman. I would say potential rather than viable. I wish it were viable. I wish it were.
I think it's viable because there's bipartisan support for it. This is not a partisan issue.
We hope so.
You have significant bipartisan support for special education at the Capitol. And I'll just say one more thing too, because as you're here and I'm sure as you continue on your presentation to us and we get down to you asking for city funds, we're going to talk about per pupil expenditures and all of that. But let's be honest that neither special education reimbursement or ECS has ever been fully funded by the state. And that puts an extreme burden on New Britain taxpayers to make up the difference. There are existing formulas that are not fully funded, and again, that puts extreme pressure on New Britain taxpayers to make up that difference.
You're exactly right. And actually,
Yeah.
that was very similar to my statement to the board last Monday night when I said, this feels like something to celebrate, but it's really just the state meeting its actual stated obligations.
And I'll just make one other comment, Mr. Chair, because I spent 12 years on the Board of Education and sat through the CJEF lawsuit that went from, 2005 to 2016. And I was an active member of that and sat in the courtroom as they weighed in favor of local districts, and then the state, of course, fought it and overturned it. But it is in the state constitution, it's a function of the state to provide for education. So although I'm very grateful for every dime that comes into New Britain for education, it is the state's responsibility to fund public education, and let us not ever forget that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Saavedra. Alderman Simpson next.
Thank you. So just really quick, a more technical question. That 4.5 times qualifier, I guess, is that spending as a district or on a particular student?
So it's based on our current average per pupil spending as a district. So actually, I'm gonna use that as an intro to, if you flip the page, it's on page 17. You can see in the burgundy color there, 16,814. So if you take that and multiply it by 4.5 times, it should come out somewhere around Ms. Alfano's number. So that's the threshold that a district has to spend to before any reimbursement is possible. So for example, if you look at the top of the list, Sharon, nearly $50,000 per kid. So if I can do the math in my head, they've got to spend $225,000 on a kid before they would start to qualify for reimbursement. They're a tiny little town who chooses not to regionalize, so they spend almost $50,000 per child per year. We have to meet 4.5 times our 16,000.
Gotcha.
And then out of that, in my example, that 125 that we spent above the threshold, we qualify for a portion of that. And that's the portion that has fluctuated over time. To Alderwoman's point, the state has never, in my 29 years as a public educator, met their obligation. It's almost worth celebration that they're talking about fully funding it this year, but that's where I like to remind people, well, they're just proposing meeting their stated obligation.
Right. There are conversations and then there are budgets, right?
Correct.
And at the state level, and just to kind of connect these points back to each other, you mentioned 2 words which get in the way of this fully funded system, and those are fiscal guardrails. How are those impacting the future of these discussions? If you know or have a good guess.
I have reached out to members of our legislative delegation. I had a conversation with Representative DeFranco yesterday. Told him I was going to be sitting with you tonight and asked that he get me any information that he might have. And what he got was it's still too early. And the fiscal guardrails are something that's beyond my, I'm an educator, I'm not a state politician, right? I understand the basics of it. What I do know is we're a state with a very large surplus, and we have many districts like ours struggling to meet our legal requirements. And if my political opinion is that if the federal government and state government are going to require any services by law, well, then they have a duty to fund them. And theoretically, that's what the excess cost formula is supposed to help with. But when it's never fully funded, and even worse, when it's funded so inconsistently. My third testimony, I only stayed up until 11:07 p.m. because a particular representative actually asked me to testify. Otherwise, they would have had to just get by with my written testimony.
I've been there.
And so by then, I just said, you have my written testimony, because a representative, a couple of speakers earlier, asked, what's the win-win? Because they spent a day hearing from parents who want better services and superintendents who wish they could give better services. My statement is the win-win is fiscal predictability. It's somewhat, it's not an embarrassment because it's not my fault, but it's a little bit embarrassing to sit here and come to you when I know there's potentially a $3.9 million swing in this particular cost. Right? It's to my nature, as you can tell by how we talk and how we present our data, that I like to know things before I show up here. But when it's impossible, and then the board is faced with an impossible task, and then giving you an impossible task where we try to read the tea leaves So for example, what I like to call the bonus, 40 million in excess cost that was allocated for the current fiscal year, of which we received, or we should receive, 1.9 million, which will not even cover our overages in this line. That was vetoed at first. Right? It was passed with bipartisan support, and then it was vetoed. And then I don't understand, again, perhaps my understanding is too simplistic. I don't understand what off-budget is, right? Supposedly they found an off-budget way to pay for this 40 million. I'm used to, maybe I'm simplistic, but I'm used to everything being in a budget that I can refer to, so.
I'm used to public record as well, yes. But just to tie it back to the fiscal guardrails, essentially what happened was the state legislature in a time before I was born, not that long ago, hopefully, they essentially capped the state's spending limits to, it was something like 1996 or 1995, but they basically capped spending to that year's limits.
With increments for inflation.
Right, with
Yeah.
incremental things, but as a state, our needs have changed, our needs as a district, as a city have changed, our priorities have changed in terms of our urban planning, in terms of our education demands, in terms of our healthcare needs, and especially at a time when like 3 hospitals across the state declare bankruptcy, where we're performing last or more recently near last in the state. The fiscal guardrails seem to be the largest obstacle to New Britain getting additional state funding because, fully funding that program you referred to earlier, you said would exceed the cap. So unless the state legislature actually does something about that cap, again, promises, 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 I want to see a budget, I want to see that lifted.
So to your point, this is why we have been cautious and we did not budget for an increase in excess cost in what you have before you. Knowing that 40 million, 80 million, 124 million might be possible, it's been so variable, we thought it prudent to stick with what the governor proposed, which is the 0, which we know is within those. So, yeah, I agree with the Alderwoman that it seems likely that additional money is coming. How much is tough to guess, right? When I've talked to people, I get, well, somewhere in between. Okay. It's against my nature not to know the facts before I come before you, so it's a difficult point for us to talk about.
I'm cut from a similar cloth, and to just answer that representative's question, the win-win there would be local legislators like ourselves and boards of education would gain clarity on what's going to happen next year. And the win for that is when New Britain students succeed, those are also Connecticut students.
Agreed.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you, Alderman Simpson. Alderman McNamara?
Thanks. Just a couple of points. You talked about this in the past, about the magnet school tuition, and that number jumped out at a 38% increase. Is that what that is? Although my cheaters don't work as well as I used to.
You are on page 560.
16, yes.
Page 15, excuse me, and the chart, either it's in both 15 and 16, the chart at the bottom of 15, correct magnet school tuition. So we're seeing an increase of, yes, from 2.4 million to 3.4 million. That's correct, Ms. Alfano? Yes.
I know you stressed last year and probably continue to stress that you want to make our schools the first choice.
Absolutely.
And we're all with you on that.
Absolutely. I believe we're proving the point. Slowly but surely, we're proving the point.
And secondly, someday I'm going to fix the fiscal year so that you're not waiting, or the council's not waiting, because we may not even know the answer on June 4th when it's the deadline for passing the municipal budget. So I appreciate those concerns. I just want to point out that we have an unsustainable property tax system that over time over-relies on a regressive property tax that over the last 2 years, taxpayers have paid between 16 and 20% more in their taxes. So that's very much on the minds of the council. But I would say that in terms of local effort, it's 128 million in operating and 2.5 million. Over the last 12 years, local effort has gone up 3.48%, which is 0.29% a year, accounting for inflation and everything else. So in a perfect world, the local effort, I believe, and should be at least in line with what other components of government, local government, gets. So we have to be mindful of that, along with, as Alderwoman Boulogne-Saavedra points out, our imperfect ECS and the obligation of unfunded, unfunded, that sort of thing. During that same 12-year period, state aid to education for New Britain has gone up something north of 60%, which has helped in terms of, and that's what I believe when we wait for the legislature and the governor to get together on those costs. I think we can be hopeful, and I hope we get an answer to that. So but we need to be mindful that in an imperfect system, state aid to education in Britain is 60% is not nothing. And with that in mind, I'm guessing the non-operating portion of the general fund budget, I'm guessing that you're going to put that into special education since you're forced to ask for it after July 1. Is that a fair assumption?
So I think the simplest or most concise answer to that is, as I opened, this is a maintenance budget with additional requests really just for special ed. So same number of school buses, relatively the same number of teachers. It's, in a way, I've actually said this now, I think 2 or 3 years in a row. For me as a superintendent, it's actually kind of a boring budget, right? It would be much more exciting for me to come before you and say, I need an 8% increase because the board and I want to create a new school that's going to serve the kids of this town who have autism, or it's going to serve as a pre-collegiate magnet school. Those are really interesting professional tasks for me as a superintendent. This is, how can we get by? I will vigorously defend anybody who tries to say that there's fluff in this budget. We don't have extra people hanging around who are not, pulling their weight. We've got a lot of really hardworking people. So in a way, it's kind of a boring budget. So, but to your question, it's the additions are the additions, and that's what you see on that page where I laid out all of that special education staff. I do want to pause. I think I did omit accidentally. There's one more expense for special ed that's not on that page. It's actually because it's listed under contracted services. And those are for the SLPs, I believe, correct? So speech language pathologists are critical to the special education program, and they're incredibly hard to find. So rather than putting them in salaried FTE, they're actually, we're requesting an additional $500,000 to support additional speech language pathologists. Our current ones, like many of our other areas of staff, are either overworked or actually outside of contract. So that actually doesn't show up on that page, but in effect, that is actually a staffing increase that I'm recommending and the board is supporting.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Alderman McNamara. As someone who used to have a debilitating stutter, I really do appreciate those speech therapists. If you put enough now and laters apparently in your mouth and try to talk, it can help that situation. But Alderwoman McAdam.
Thank you. Excuse me, just for a point of clarity, because many parents have actually asked this. Can you give some examples of services that the school system could not provide for a student, that the student would be outplaced? Because as I understand it, if they go to an outplaced school, they still have to pay for services like paras and OT and all the services they would get, and that New Britain still has to pay for.
Correct.
All those services as well as transportation.
Yep. And I'll try to give you an answer that is concise that you can share with your constituents. It's any of any of or many of the disabilities when they reach the end of what we call the LRE continuum, least restrictive environment continuum. So by law and by ethics, we have to put the child in the environment that is most like the general classroom. So if a child with a mild disability can be served in the regular classroom with perhaps a shared para for additional support, that's low on the LRE continuum. But it really can be any of those disabilities, perhaps most notably students with behavior disorders and or disabilities, and or autism. We can service a lot of those children in-house in our Bridges program or in our KEY program. But when their needs and when their disabilities become so far down that spectrum, that continuum, then they really do need specialized instruction, for example, for a behavior disorder or for autism in this example. So it's not just a single type of need, a single type of disability that students are outplaced for. It's multiple types of disabilities when they become quite severe or quite high in need for that child. And we simply either don't have like a specialized facility, staff, or sometimes the ratio of staffing that that child needs.
One more thing, sorry. So it's not something as simple as if a student needs a one-to-one para, that they would be outplaced for needs with something like that. It has to be something where a one-to-one para, and there would be more than a one-to-one para needed before they're outplaced, correct?
You're exactly correct.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Alderwoman McAdam. Alderwoman Belain-Saavedra was right ahead of you, then Alderman McNamara.
I appreciate all your programmatic information and student achievement. That's wonderful. I want to actually talk about the nuts and bolts of the money. So I don't know if I should wait till later. Thank you very much for answering my emails and for the brief conversation we had at the Autism Fair. I appreciate your time and your frankness with me. I'm having a hard time grappling with the fact that, with the exception of the increase to special education, that you're calling this a status quo budget when you're getting approximately $10 million if the 1.9 comes through in excess cost, $10 million new dollars in state money, 2.6 new dollars in city money. That gives you over $12 million in above and beyond what your current budget is. I'm having a hard time understanding, and the $8 million that you already accounted for in Alliance District. So if you added all that money together, I mean, you were asking for almost $20 million in new monies from state sources and from what you originally asked for us. How is all this new money funding a status quo budget? I'm grappling with that. I noticed that you have 95 new positions added to the Alliance grant. You did not reduce the general fund by 95 positions, so that has to be extra positions in the Alliance grant. You're asking for new paras, but I understand your vacancy list carries a significant amount of vacancies in that. So I'm just trying to connect all the dots with the carried funded vacancies that you have, the additional positions that you have, calling this a status quo budget, and knowing at bare minimum you have $12 million new dollars in your budget. Can you kind of put that in some kind of context for me?
Absolutely, we can. And I'm actually it's a perfect question for me to turn over to Ms. Alfano.
Sure. So in terms of the FTEs in Alliance, what we've done is with our Alliance increase, we've transferred out of the general fund and we've moved FTEs into the Alliance grant. So that's why you're seeing that increase in Alliance.
Correct, as explained on page 13.
Correct, and plus the positions from page 13. Okay, just, right, so that page.
But I think we were clear about that.
Yep, no, I just want to, because I want to be very careful on semantics, because when I'm saying I'm asked the superintendent about a status quo budget, technically what you're presenting is not a status quo budget, and that's fine, because you're presenting your needs. But I just want to make sure we are using the same language. What is in front of the council is not a status quo budget, and again, that's fine, but it is not. Continue, Ms. Alfano.
So, the FTEs, those are the only additional requests. If we go to the non-personnel line items, all those are all contractual increases. So there's nothing additional that we've added to those line items. Those are just either increases in our transportation contracts, in our health insurance, in our, the copiers, all of our leasing agreements, all of our software. So those are all of our day-to-day operational needs that have those contractual increases. So that's the only increase that you'll see in the non-personnel line items, and that's what you're seeing here.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair. I am a 2 + 2 = 4 kind of girl. I love all the graphs and charts. I love the narratives. But what I would like to see is here's all our new money, all of our new money, and this is how we're spending it, and just do subtraction. So 12 million, you're guaranteed 12 million minimum. All the subtractions of where that 12 million is going, because I still can't wrap my head around
The 12 million, please, so we know the 8.8 from Alliance.
the anticipated increase in excess cost, 1.9.
So
That's a conservative estimate in the increase.
But we've been transparent with you that that's not in this budget.
Right, I know. I'm talking to you about
So we're not-
fiscal
we're not ask-
realities.
We're not asking for that much money, just to be clear. That's not part of our request. So if we choose to assume 1.9, then that's an assumption that's not in the budget.
Right, I know it wouldn't be part of your request because it would be a revenue stream that would then be able to be
Right,
subtracted from your request from city taxpayers.
But I also want to be clear that we're not going to be able to show you where that 1.9 is in our budget because it's not in our budget. You're asking us to show you where that 1.9 is in the budget. It's not in the budget. We're being transparent with you on that. So I think the fair amount would be the 8.8 million of Alliance.
Okay,
Plus the mayor's proposal.
2.6, okay.
I think
All
that
right,
would,
and
I think
that's-
that would be the fair number.
Okay, and that's fair enough. I would still like to see that here's our status quo budget. If nothing changed in your budget, absolutely nothing, what would that budget cost? That's what I would like to know, because to me, that's a status quo. You're not adding any staff. You're not doing anything extra. You're doing exactly what you're doing this year with the exact same number of staff people into next year. What would that number look like? There's no way that's a $10 million increase.
So I would encourage you to take our bottom line, which the new bottom line as shown here on page 20 is 11.3 million. Then from that, if you wanted to know that, we could subtract out page 13, right? Which is 2.6 million. That's your status quo budget.
Asking for how much more money for a status quo budget?
So that, we are not asking, you're asking, with all due respect, what we're asking
No, I'm
for-
asking you how much
Right.
money you would need to do exactly what you're doing this year, next year. That's what I'm
So
asking
it's
you.
11.3 minus 2.6. Sure. It's 11.3 minus 2.6.
Yes, it's 11.3 minus 2.6.
So that's 8.7.
8.7 million to have no additional staff.
You are correct, ma'am. We've done our best to lay it out for you here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Blaine Saavedra. We had Alderman McNamara next, then Alderman Scott, and I'll get to Alderman Simpson.
Just to clarify for the council, you started out 11%. And your terminology, I prefer your terminology to status quo. I think you're using mission critical is reflected in that 8% more you're looking for.
So what I've said is I call it a level services budget. In our conversation, the Alderwoman and I clarified that back and forth with each other at the Autism Fair. I call it level services, and I call it that because I believe that's what Alderwoman Boulogne Saavedra is asking for. It's a level services budget plus page 13.
And your finance directors reiterated that 90% of this contractual, just the cost of operations without any new bells and whistles.
Correct. To your question, Mr. McNamara, and to Ms. Boulogne Saavedra's question, I wish transportation did not go up by 2.7 million, but it will. I wish special ed tuitions, outplacements, wouldn't go up by 3.5 million, but it will. So that's what we're attempting to be transparent with you on page 16 about is just the increases. So when we say transportation and bus monitors is going up by 2.7 million, that's what I call level services, same number of buses. So Ms. Bowling-Cerveja, I agree with your incredulity. It's hard to believe things would go up by that much, but they will. But they will, either by contracted increments that are contracts that went out to competitive bid, or employment contracts, or utility contracts, or just based on what we see as trend lines of how much outplacements are going to cost. So I don't mind the hard questions one bit. It's what you should do. We're talking about a lot of the public's money. I wish it weren't that much to stay level services, but it is.
Thank you, Dr. Gasper. Thank you, Alderman McNamara. Alderwoman Scott was next.
Yeah, I know like every department that's come here, the prices have gone up, right? So every single department, because of the price of living, everything goes up. So it's expected that your prices would go up for the schools. Our kids are our future. It's important. Like even as raising as a mother, prices go up, you know, all the time with your kid, especially when they get older sometimes, right? It's a car instead of a toy. So I totally understand it, and I hope that, you know, you will get the money from the state, and that we can improve things at the state and make it more consistent. But right now, we're dealing with what we're dealing with, and you don't know what money you're getting. We're making assumptions about that. Until we see it in front of us, we don't know what it is. And so it's our responsibility as local officials to take care of our home and what is happening here. So that's our responsibility. We can't pass the buck on anybody else. We have to do what we have to do here for our kids. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could suggest, I've got a quick 4 pages to go through, and then we can have open questions on anything, if I may.
Sure, let's proceed and let you finish up. Thank you.
Great. So page 17 is a question or attempt to answer the question, is the request reasonable? This is a calculation you've seen before, a data display you've seen before. Again, all publicly available data, and whenever you see public data, I'm using whatever the state has released as the most recently publicly available data. So there's a whole list. I've abridged it so it fits on one side of one sheet of paper here. Down the left of page 17 is the per pupil spending for every district in the state. This is just the local share. This does not include other funding sources that other districts might get. I shouldn't say our graphics whiz, Powell Figot, has highlighted for you in the very faint green the other districts that are DIRG I, the other urban districts. You see the state median, and you see our rank of 160 out of 165, $16,814 per child. On the right is a calculation you've seen before. I simply ask, what would it look like if each of the New Britain children were funded at the same rate as the children from these other districts? So this is an important thing. This is where we ask ourselves, is the request reasonable? And I'll just pick Windham because it's in the middle of the block here. So Windham ranks 97th in the state for what it spends per child. It spends $20,930 per year per child. That's a difference of $4,116 to us. And then I'm multiplying by whatever our enrollment was at the time. See that 9717 at the top? So you take the difference, you multiply by our number of kids. That's how I control for size, right? Wouldn't be fair to compare total dollars of Hartford to total dollars of New Britain. So if every child in New Britain were funded at the same level that every child in Windham is funded, you would have to add $40 million to our budget. That's how we read that chart on the right. Again, it's just for the purposes of comparison. To me, I'm a taxpayer too. I ask myself, is this reasonable amount to spend? On page 18, very quickly, is just a graphical representation of that. And then wrapping up, on page 19, a summary of the expenditures. We're showing you where the money would be spent on the right-hand side of 19. Graphically then, of course, and then just wrapping up with the request of $139,362,463 compared to the current adopted budget of $128 million. Even our request, which is an update based on that new alliance money that we are projecting of $11,362,463, a requested increase of 8.88%. Can you imagine when I brought this to the board in January and it was 12.4%?
I can.
This sounds like a bargain. This sounds like a bargain to me. Of course, I'm joking.
We needed to laugh at that.
Yeah, right.
Of course, I'm joking, right? But we take this process very, very seriously, and of course, we continue to invite your questions.
I thank you very much. Alderman Simpson, you're next.
Thank you. I had a couple lined up in the queue here. Okay, so that 11 and change number minus 2 and whatever, we get 8.7, right? How much of that increase are contractual obligations?
How much of the increase are contractual obligations? So we can look at.
Of that 8.7.
Sure. Well, you're asking me to do some math on the fly. You mean,
I'm
if
with
I'm
you.
following, you're assuming the mayor's proposed increase. Is that the math you're?
No, the math we were referring to earlier, trying to figure out what is level services or status quo.
Oh, I'm sorry, that
That
2.6 million. I thought you meant the mayor's projected increase. Thank you.
No.
Understood. Do you want to take that one?
So if I understand correctly, we're looking at the 11.3 million. And we are subtracting the 2.6. That brings us down to 8.7.
Right.
And what amount of that 8.7 is contractual increases?
Yes.
Okay, so that would have to be the 8.7. That's it. There's nothing additional
all of
on those non-personnel line items. Those are all contractual increases. Those are all obligations that we have that have increases that we need to meet.
So in other words, there's no new
Nothing new.
program that I've proposed to the board that has come forward to you that we can say, well, that new thing can wait one more year.
Right. So I mean, effectively, like in terms of programs, what you're asking for in terms of more is 0.
Correct, and that's what I call a level services budget, other than the additional special ed staffing from the page we talked about.
Right. And just to avoid debating semantics, I would consider that an okay use of status quo, despite it not factoring in. However, whether it's status quo or level services or not, all of it is under this umbrella of a threat of the federal government. I was wondering if we anticipate any dings in our budgets from federal sources.
The last thing I read about the president's proposed budget said he was cutting federal spending for education, but then in quotes, preserve Title I. So Title I would be our biggest stream of federal dollars. But that's the end of the detail that I would have on that.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. That's all I had.
That was a tweet, correct? Was that a tweet?
I don't know.
Thank you, Alderman Simpson. Who do we have now? Alderwoman Sanchez.
Thank you for coming.
Of course.
Oh, I got my voice back. Yes. So I just had a question. When you said about the special education program, what does this program covers? Like, because I keep hearing like autistic kids and everything, but what about the other kids with different conditions, like ADHD?
Sure.
What's going on with all that?
So there's a variety of different disabilities that can qualify a student for special education services. In a nutshell, the student goes through a PPT process. We call it PPT-1. There's an evaluation. Now, if we suspect a behavior disorder, there's a behavior evaluation. If we suspect a learning disorder, there's an evaluation of that. In essence, what has to be found to qualify for special education is that the child has a disability that negatively impacts their ability to learn. There's another level that you might consider kind of above that, which is called a 504 plan. Students who have a 504 plan are still considered general education, but they might have a condition that's more temporary. It might be a medical issue that is currently impacting their learning, but may not in kind of the longer term or the more severe term. So it's kind of a hard question for me to answer because special ed can be so many different things.
Yeah, that's why I bring that up, because my son, when he was in school, like back in the days, now he's gonna be 27. He was in special education, but he was bilingual too.
Correct.
So it's a lot of things going on. People think that only the kids that are in special education is only the autistic kids. People need to know that it's more kids out there in the system with different disabilities that are they're supposed to be taking advantage of the programs.
Correct. If you look at page 8 on the left, those specialized programs at the bottom, you can see those are the smaller chunks. So students in Bridges are students who have behavioral needs. I'm on page 8 on the left, the bar chart. The lighter blue, students in Bridges are students who have substantial behavior needs. Now, to get into the Bridges program, we've tried to program for you to the question earlier. You've been given a para, you've been given other supports, and then we've moved you down this continuum. And Bridges is more secluded. It's more self-contained, as we call it. Now, Key is autism, as you mentioned, but Pathways is a program that we have in district that serves students who are medically fragile and or perhaps have Down syndrome. So there are, but again, these are kids who they're getting towards, perhaps in the future might need an outplacement, what we're trying to serve them here. The biggest chunks, to your point, Ms. Sanchez, is those biggest dark blue chunks in that chart are all the other disabilities brought together into one bar there. So yes, there's a lot of different ways that a student might qualify for special education services or a 504 plan. The key is what we call that PPT1, PPT2, where the student is evaluated by a professional, is the PPT process has to find that there's a negative impact on their ability to learn.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Barbosa?
Are there enough resources to cover every student that has a 504 plan?
No, that's why I'm proposing more. That's the simplest, most concise answer I would have for you.
Simple, quick answers are welcome here.
Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair?
Please.
Do you have a lot of parents complaining about not having those resources available to them? Or are they just not aware that the resources are not available?
So do we get complaints? Yes. Every district does. Do we do our best to address them? Of course we do. We do really amazing things with the resources we have. Again, this idea of in-district programs, there's superintendents out there that are testifying before the legislature acting like this is a new idea. I'm saying, like, we've had this stuff in New Britain for a long time. But parents, of course they have concerns. And of course they come to PPT meetings looking for more services. Not everyone, of course, but some do. And not to go make the answer too long, but we work hard to abide by the law, and there's a tricky word in the law, and that word is appropriate. We call it FAPE. A child must have a free and appropriate public education. Now, appropriate is a debatable word. What the parents sometimes think is appropriate and what we think is appropriate can be two different things. And we have really professional staff that tries to keep those conversations in those PPT meetings polite and respectful, but of course, passions can flare at times. But appropriate, for an example, if a child moves from Newington to New Britain, and Newington doesn't have these programs such as let's just suppose. So a child has been outplaced by Newington because they have moderate autism, and that child moves to New Britain. Our professionals will say, great, we have a key program, we can serve your child in district. But those parents might have already fallen in love with their child's outplacement. And when that child moves, we immediately have to take over that outplacement, but we get a chance to have a PPT meeting. So those are the ones that can become contentious when parents are either expecting or accustomed to a level of service that they think is appropriate, but we feel as though we can provide services in a different way that we think is appropriate. And of course, we try to be respectful. In very, very rare cases, those complaints go to a thing called due process, which is basically where a state arbitrator would decide.
Through you, Mr. Chair. In honor of Teacher Appreciation Week, I want to send a shout out and kudos to all of the educators in New Britain, around Connecticut, for being there for our students. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Alderwoman Barbosa. Alderman Russell was next. Mike, please.
I'll turn mine off.
I'm stuck on the 504. Now, not every 504 requires a service, does it?
In some way, yes, some type of accommodation. Now, a 504 might be something as preferential seating, extra time on tests. It's usually less intensive than a special ed plan, but in some way, the purpose of the plan is to provide extra accommodations and or services. You bet.
I was not part of the AV department, my bad. Who was next? My apologies. Alderwoman Scott, or were you just helping out? I was trying to help out. Okay, my apologies.
I want to,
Alderman McNamara, you next?
just a point of, I want all the people to ask the questions, but would Mrs. Marino or any other board members wish to make a comment?
That's the mic for board members there.
3 minutes only, no, I'm like.
I think probably we're all waiting to see what happens. Yeah, the 12.07 was a shocker. Yes, I'm happy to see it coming down. My statement at the time when we approved the budget and moved it forward was this. After walking through the schools, myself, meeting with teachers, admin staff, I do not doubt for a minute that services are needed for the students in our district. Absolutely. One thing, though, that I will say too, though, I have to put on my other hat as a retired widow on a fixed income, and I understand what increasing taxes would do, and to those in my neighborhood, like me, what that would mean. My statement too, in addition, during our approval, was that 60% served from the state. Yes, that's a wonderful thing over the years, but they could do more. My fight and my push was not so much to hound anyone in particular other than those in Hartford. Dr. Gasper, as he said, testified a couple times. I have sent emails and documentation to representatives there, especially on the special ed committee, because even on the one chart, when you go from 2020 to 2021, it went up $10 million. $10 million for special education. And we didn't get the funding to cover that. I understand the state has a lot of pull, and they want to put forth certain things, but when it becomes unfunded mandates and that puts the pressure on cities such as us, we can't do that. We just can't. There's a reality check. There is. Again, I don't dispute the children deserve these services. They absolutely do. It's just difficult when you sit before the council, when you sit on public view with all of your neighbors watching, and the concern about raising taxes, it's no different than pilot funds. We don't get all the funding we need for the pilot money either. For a city of 13 square miles, 48% is non-taxable. Okay. And I would seriously hate to see this district get into a situation like Bridgeport or even Hartford. They're a disaster. They're a disaster. And those cities have more corporate funding and taxpayers than we do. I wish I had a magic pill to fix, or pen, or won the lottery. I'd be happy to contribute. But I think probably the faces here at this table is, oh God, we have to do something by the end of June. And we're not looking forward to it, whatever it ends up being. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. That was informative. Alderwoman McNally?
So if these positions are funded in the way that you've asked, would that not help with the cost of outplacement because we have more services and more means to provide services with our students inside New Britain?
Potentially, yes. That was part of our conversation, and I can't say part of our calculation because it actually wasn't a calculation. It's using our professional experience. I don't know, between Mr. Spalding, Ms. Alfano, and I, we're probably somewhere around 70 years in the profession total. And look, as I said earlier, the future is somewhat easy to predict. When you look at the line for special ed, what's called the prevalence rate in the state and in the district, and then outplacements, we just felt if we didn't propose for that 3-point-something million increase in outplacements, it would have been irresponsible of us when all the signals are pointing this way. And we've seen it just in my 3 years here, but it's also, again, it's a statewide and perhaps even a national trend. So the answer is yes.
And I was not by any means insinuating the outplacement number. I was just saying it's preventative is better than, being proactive and preventative is better than reacting later on.
Yep.
And if we have the services in our own town to do it for our own children, it's better than outplacing it in the long run.
You are correct, and some of those additional staff, we think, would help to mitigate that, but even with some mitigation, we would still anticipate that it would go up. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you, Alderwoman McAdam. Do we have more questions? Alderwoman Scott?
I just wanted to bring up some of my experience with working with the IEP plans and the 504s and the kiddos. When I go to other towns, sometimes it's a lot more easier, right? It's they have the funding in those towns. When you brought up the fact that they have so much money in the suburban towns, I don't have a problem with New Britain I wish that New Britain would get more money and all the inner cities would get more money and funding, because when it comes down to getting the things that kids need, it's sometimes it's if you need your kid outplaced, you can't here, sometimes because there's pushback or there's no services available right now. And we need to make those services more available, those small settings. That some of our kids really need those small settings to be successful. So I really hope that, I think it's sad that we don't get the amount of money that other towns get, So I think that's something that we need to look at too. Thank you guys so much. And I had a question about, this is off the topic a little bit, but it isn't the topic because it does have to do with funding. Do our clubs here in New Britain go on field trips?
Yes.
And
But not at this time of year, Ms. Scott. I saw your communication with Representative Sanchez. April and May is a very, very difficult time of year for field trips. So to your inquiry that did make its way to me,
Yes.
I would encourage you to work with teachers much earlier in the year.
I did, actually, so,
Okay.
yeah, so that's where the frustration comes in on my
but-
part.
But what I would say is,
But it's,
every part of our budget is constrained, and that would include field trips. So field trips imply or implicate transportation dollars, that probably a sub is going to be needed in that classroom. We wish we could have more field trips and a broader variety of field trips, but everything is connected to our ability to pay for it.
right. Yeah, so that's another thing I wanted to bring up here, because we do need, I mean, we obviously need more money than what you're asking for, is the point I'm making, because learning doesn't just happen in classrooms. And when we're talking about being preventive and making sure that our kids are learning, we need to understand that that happens outside of the classroom as well. And I hope maybe we can talk later to make sure that this does happen for next year, because it's been like a year and a half of me trying to do this. But, so we'll talk about it after.
If you drop me a line, I will definitely connect you with the right principal.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, Alderwoman Scott. Do we have more questions? Alderwoman Blaine Saavedra?
Thank you. And Dr. Gasper, I sent this to you in an email, and if you responded, I didn't see it, so forgive me for asking it now. Because we're talking so much about increases in your budget, you talked about transportation, you talk extensively about staff salary increases. Can you please tell us union by union what the percentage increase in salaries are this coming budget? It was
Sure.
not, it's not in this, because I went through this extensively, and it's not delineated in there.
Okay. We have something close, and Ms. Alfano can provide more detail, I believe. So if you.
Because like I can tell you on the city side, our contracts are a 2.5 to a 2.7.
Oh,
And
so
I
just-
could, and I could break that down union by union. So
Oh,
what I'm
sure.
asking you is your teachers, your paras, 1186, union by union, what are you budgeting for in the coming year?
Understood. So you're just asking for what is the contractual increase, just the
Correct.
percentage point? Sure.
Yep.
Because I was going to say that is somewhat shown in the, on page 10 by dollars, but not by contractual percentage.
Correct.
So when you say staffing by union left to right, you can see that by dollars increase. If I had a laptop, I could just pull up the board's website that has all of our contracts on it.
So you can't give me an answer right now.
Not in front of me, no, ma'am.
Okay,
But-
so from what I was able to get from some other people is most of your contracts are a 3.0 or a little bit north of there,
I would say ranging between 2.5 and 3 1/4 would be my guess.
3
but I'll-
1/4. Okay,
I just have a point of information. You might be intrigued by page 15. There's a column labeled contractual increase percentage, and it goes through each union dollar by dollar amount.
no, that's a percentage of the budget. That's not a percentage of their salary increase. That's what I'm asking. So if you make
I see.
$25,000, are you getting a 2% increase next year, a 3% increase? Employee by employee, union by union.
Yeah, that would be.
That's not that. That's a percentage of the budget.
Right, but that would just be outlined in the
That's
collective.
not what I'm asking.
Let's limit back and forth. Let's limit back and
Collective
forth.
bargaining
Just,
agreement. That's what I'm.
Right, but that page shows you a percentage of the budget, percentage increase over the budget. It's not telling you what Nate, I'm asking him, it's not telling me, that does not answer my question. So I would like to have that, to know, so that when I'm thinking about what you're asking me in salary increases, what union by union is getting as a salary bump. And if I understand it, worked this way when I was on the Board of Education, your non-union administrators, their increases are usually linked to what, a local 51?
most typically, yes.
So in your, and what do you have, nine non-union administrators?
So that is on page. On page 10. 9 is correct.
9. Okay, so you have 9 individuals with independent contracts that aren't related to, that aren't unionized. Is that a 3% increase, including yourself? Your contract is a 3% increase?
my contract is less than a 3% increase.
Okay. Kudos to you and kudos to the board then, because I believe in leading by example. And if you're coming and talking about salaries, I'm going to say this. When I was on, and I'm not recommending you do it. Sal will remember this because he was a teacher at the time and a union leader. We had to go and ask for concessions. We asked our staff, all of our staff, for concessions, and it started with the top, taking a 0, and ended up all the non-union administrators in Local 51 took a 0. We also froze line items, and when I say freeze, I mean legitimately freeze line items, so that if copy paper was $10,000 in your budget this year, it would be $10,000 in your budget next year. I'm just saying this as the New Britain has always gone through these hardships and these really difficult.
May I
Sure,
please?
absolutely.
So we did freeze the non-personnel. That's what I mean when they proposed 100% of what they got last year.
Perfect.
The only difference is I didn't say they had to spend exactly the same on copy paper.
Yep.
The principals had the permission and the freedom to move within that 100%.
Now, when I say perfect, I don't mean it's a perfect situation. I mean perfect that you went down that road in terms of trying to save dollars within the budget. Our city budget is only going up 1.47%. So and we only have one new position in our city budget. So you can imagine then digesting your budget request for a multi-million-dollar increase with a variety of new staff positions. It's just hard to grapple with. And this council sat through 2 nights of hearings where a lot of council people were flabbergasted at how short-staffed some of our departments were. So it's a balancing act.
I can understand perfectly.
Yep.
And I've said it here before, I'll say it tonight, and I say it to the board, I've said it to the mayor. I am not blind to the political ramifications of this proposal. My job is, as the chief educator in town, is to propose what I believe the kids of New Britain need.
Absolutely.
And I sleep well at night knowing that, and that's why I don't shy away from hard questions at all, because I have a lot of confidence in the process that got us here tonight. I'm thankful, quite frankly, when I speak to my counterparts, that this is not a district where the education budget goes to referendum, because those principals, those superintendents talk about coming in at. They target a politically palpable percentage ahead of time, and then they customize their budget to that. I think there's danger in that, because then the Board of Education, the council, and the residents don't get a chance to hear from the chief educator in town as to what the exact needs are. So no, I'm not blind and I'm not ignorant to the political challenge of putting forward, right? I never thought in my first year as a superintendent here I was going to put forth an 8-point-something% budget. I had my car running and warmed up outside just in case I had to beat a quick retreat. But in a way, I don't take any pleasure, and I know how tough it is for me to come before you and the board to come before you with this. But I think it's important that we have this exercise where the needs of the kids and the schools and the teachers are laid bare for everybody to see, all funding sources and all needs, and then we have to have the political conversation about what is tenable.
Absolutely, and I agree with you. And so when I ask you pointed questions, it's because if I need to sell something to my constituents, 2 + 2 needs to equal 4. And sometimes these beautiful graphs and charts and numbers are lovely for the people who are in the inner circle and understand that machination of stuff. But for your average person out there, it's like, why is the Board of Ed asking for $12 million? What exactly is that going to fund? How is that going to benefit my kid, that increase? If they don't get that increase, how is it negatively going to affect my kid? So I just think the clearer and more straightforward the conversation is, the better it is for all of us.
We understand completely.
And my kids went through New Britain Public Schools. My daughter was one of the kids outplaced. I fully understand what special education needs are and how that system works and how expensive it can be. And I fully appreciate that, totally appreciate that. So my questions come to you not because I don't support what you're doing, but depending on what we're going to do and take action, I need to really be able to articulate what you're asking for and why you're asking for that. So in that vein, please forgive me if I ask questions that make you uncomfortable, but that's my job. You're coming here doing your job, and me asking you my questions is doing my job. And as long as we both respect each other, that we have these roles.
Of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I respect Dr. Gasper. So I'm not finished with my questions. One more question that I had emailed you about was the vacancies. You're carrying vacancies. And I'd like to know the total value of the vacancies you carry currently, if they're new vacancies, if you've been carrying them over the course of this year, last year, in particularly because I'm a huge supporter of paraeducators. How many vacancies do you have in paraeducators? Because you're asking for 20 or 21 positions in this budget.
Sure.
How many vacancies do you already carry?
So I think I sent you that full report that was in the board packet.
I couldn't open it. I tried. I'm sorry. I couldn't open it.
We will resend it to you. So
Okay.
you can have the full detail.
You don't have the answer now.
In front of me, no. But
Does anybody up there understand what the vacancy lists look like?
we understand it. I don't want to give you an exact number if it's not the correct number.
Okay, because I think it's important for the council to understand that too. That
Absolutely.
you have a vacancy list that ends up being I'm going to use the word surplus. I know we talked about that in your email, that it's not a surplus. It ends up that you have money in your salaries account because you carried vacancies, and then what you do with that money at the end of the year is fill in where you had shortages. I get that.
Typically in substitutes that we're filling those vacancies.
Right. But I also noticed that you have a separate list for substitutes, a separate line item that says substitutes, and I don't know if that's your substitute contract that you have versus long-term substitutes for maybe teachers who are out on long-term extended leave.
It's all one contract.
Okay, it's all one. Okay, so when that line goes over, your salary line should be able to kick into that line
Correct.
because of those vacancies.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And I would appreciate getting, separate from the board packet, because I was not able to open it, a list of your current vacancies.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman McNamara next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would actually, unless there's some burning other issue, and I'm not going to be redundant, I've made my points. I would like to call 36785 on the general fund budget. I'd like to call the question.
Motion to call the question, seconded by Alderwoman McAdam. All in favor of the motion to call the question, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion to call the question. The referral is for a neutral recommendation, seconded by one of our distinguished aldermen or another. All in favor say aye of the neutral recommendation. Aye. All opposed, nay. All right, the motion carries.
I'd just like to thank the superintendent and members of the board for doing this again this year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your attention, everyone. Did you get those notes?
All right, we just have to close out the agenda. The next item on the agenda is 36786-1 to act upon a resolution regarding the special revenue funds. May I have a motion to remove from the table? Moved by Alderwoman Belen Saavedra. Do I have a second? Seconded by Alderman Russell. All opposed say aye. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion carries. With the current motion on the floor for 36786-1 to be referred with a neutral. Is there any discussion? Hopefully not. Seeing no discussion, the motion to refer with a neutral recommendation. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed nay. Motion carries. The next item is 36444-1 to act upon a resolution regarding the budget appropriation for Capital Improvement Program 2425. May I have a motion removed from the table? So moved by Alderwoman Belen Saavedra, seconded by Alderman McNamara. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed nay. The current motion on the floor is 36787-1 to be referred with a neutral. Any discussion? Hopefully
Yes,
not.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, all right.
Thank you. Just to the Board of Ed members, before you leave, we're doing the LoSiP grant right now, the budget for LoSiP. And this is the first year that 3 projects requested by the Board of Education are on that LoSiP. The mayor did reach out. Smedley ended up producing an extensive list through the Facilities Committee. And I just want to say for the record, there's the Di Loretto flooring, there's lighting at Lincoln, and what was the other one? There's 3 of them on there. Total of like $395,000 worth of projects on there. So I just wanted you to know that.
Thank you, Alderwoman Belen Saavedra. Any further discussion on the item? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Referred with a neutral recommendation. May I have a
Motion adjourned?
made by Alderman McNamara, seconded by Alderman Simpson. Thank goodness for that speech therapist. Have a good night, everyone.